Hello, welcome to our first ever Q&A video. If you don't know who I am, my name is Obi, and together with my amazing wife Salma, we run Middle Eats. To celebrate reaching 50,000 subscribers, I thought it would be a good idea for us to have a chat so you can get to know us better. But before we move on to the questions, there's something I need to do first. I'll be right back. Well, that's a lot better, isn't it? So I'm joined by the other half of Middle East, Salma, who is going to be answering some questions with me today.
Hello.
Right, so this is going to be quite a rough edit because we're just going to answer the questions and we'll see how things turn out. I haven't really prepared any answers, so we'll see how things go. But yeah, let's get started. I think we'll start with some general questions first. So the first question is from one of our patrons, Aaron WP. And he asks, I wonder about where your families come from and what it's like there, and where you guys are from now and what that's like. Do you want to go first, Selma?
Okay, so I'm Egyptian. Both my parents are Egyptian. I grew up in Dubai and then moved to Cairo where I met Obi. And right now we live in London.
Yep. So my dad is Egyptian and my mum is English and German. I grew up about half here in the UK and half in Egypt. And then I went there for university, which is where I met Selma. I'd say Egypt is, and particularly Cairo, it's chaotic good in the sense that it's very, very busy. There's a lot to do and a lot to see. But also, like, it's really hard to plan things in advance. London is like the exact opposite. It's like quiet but fast-paced, so you can live a very quiet life here, but things are just always moving so fast. Right now we're in the outskirts of London, which is quite leafy, quite green. Yeah, it's quite nice here.
Yeah, but the weather isn't nice.
Yeah, so expect the weather to change quite a lot and the lighting to change in this video. And we've got similar questions by a few other people. So some people are asking, so we've got Nat Violin, they're asking... tell us a bit about your background, when and why you got interested in food. So my mother used to cook food from quite a lot of different countries. There's a lot of different dishes that she would make, and she had friends from all over the Middle East and elsewhere. So, you know, we grew up eating dishes like Libyan bakbaka at home. We had obviously Egyptian foods, and I'd go and travel to Egypt and eat my grandma's food as well. So I think that definitely instilled in me a passion for Middle Eastern food. And then I think it only got more strong when I met Salma and I started going over to their house, because her mum's an excellent cook and her grandma was an excellent cook. And so it was always just, you know, such a big thing for me to just, you know, go over there and eat the food the way they make it.
So, as Obi just said, my mom and my grandma were amazing cooks, so I grew up eating amazing food. I sort of took it for granted and I only realized what I had until I moved here. And then I didn't have my mom's food anymore. So I was just like, okay, what do I do now? And I guess that's where it started. I would call my mom and ask her for recipes that I really, really missed, for foods that I really missed. And yeah, that's where it started from. And then we started hosting a lot of our Egyptian friends who were missing Egyptian food as well. And yeah, that's where it all started.
Yes, I think the essence of the channel came about because it's always been a bit of a struggle to find Middle Eastern recipes, and especially ones with accurate amounts in the recipe. So it's always like, you know, throw a bit of this together and a bit of this, and oh yeah, you'll need 5 or 6 of this, but then it doesn't specify the sizes or how long to cook things or, you know, or exact grams or teaspoon measurements. And so you can cook a dish twice using the same set of directions and instructions and reach something completely different, which is kind of where we wanted to make things a bit different, in that we want to give precise measurements for, if you always follow these exact directions, it will always have the same result. Kind of like you'd get in other recipes, you know, from other countries around the world. It's also one of those things where there's a lot of variation between different countries, even different cities. So it was always about trying to get, you know, the flavor that we kind of know the dish tastes like. That was always something that was very important for us.
That was the struggle I was having when I was getting recipes from my mom. She would always go like, yeah, a pinch of that, a pinch of this, and a bit of this, a bit of that. And I would always ask, okay, how much is a bit? You know, she's like, you know, just a spoon of that or a hint of that. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
So the only way I was able to do that is just by adding more and just using my mom's food as reference. And I think this is how we made it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you always get instructions which are like, you need to work to this specific consistency. And so if you're someone who's unfamiliar to the dish, you're not going to know how to put this stuff together. And that's kind of one of the main things that made us want to start this channel. I actually first started the channel a long time ago, about 2 years ago now. And I failed miserably. So I put it on the back burner until COVID happens. And that was kind of what gave me a break and let me actually start working on it. In terms of work, I'm a software engineer. I work for a large e-commerce company here in the UK. And basically my role is that I spend quite a lot of time with junior members of the team, helping them, work on things. I define work that we have to do and, get that going. I develop new code for the websites and make it, obviously work and stuff like that. It's quite a fun job. I like coding. I've been doing it, for the better part of my life. And it's a very interesting job because as a person, I love problem solving. That's the kind of thing I love to do. If there's a puzzle or if there's something that I can get my teeth into and, work on it and try to understand how something works, that's just the best thing for me.
As for me, I'm a scientist. I'm currently doing my PhD. I am studying the relationship between the human microbiome, or the bacteria you have in your gut, with inflammatory bowel disease. I have done quite a lot of research. I go into the lab, run experiments and whatnot. And since COVID, I've had to change my project into something more computational. But yeah, I guess this is where science comes into play. This is why I really like recipe development, I think, because it just reminds me of my days in the lab, running experiments here and there, tweaking things, and changing small things and seeing the effect and so on.
Yeah.
So, I think recipe development is just like doing experiments in the lab,
absolutely.
Which is can be frustrating, but sometimes very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move any further, I thought it would be a good time to talk to you about our Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a platform that allows fans like yourselves to financially support and contribute to the success of the creators you know and love. By supporting us on Patreon, you can help us pay for ingredients, get better filming equipment, and show your appreciation for the recipes we put out. Thanks to our wonderful patrons, we've already purchased the slider, which makes it so much easier to capture beautiful shots of the dishes that we make. We currently have 3 tiers on Patreon, and when you sign up, you get access to an exclusive patrons only feed, which I post regular channel updates on. You can also get your name into the credits of each video, and we'll continue to expand the Patreon offering as the channel grows. I answer every message on Patreon as well, so if you have a question and you want to make sure that I see it, then this is the best place to do it. Thank you to all of our existing patrons for supporting the channel, and I'll leave a link to it in the description box for anyone who wants to join.
So, a question from a patron of ours, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Jawhara Elatos. What made you decide to do a food channel?
Yeah, so I think the key thing here was that we've developed these recipes based on, what we like to eat. But all these recipes that we were putting together, we weren't really sharing them with anyone. So it was kind of a situation where, we would have been grateful if we could have found a channel similar to ours that would have helped us learn how to cook these dishes. So we realized there's probably loads of people in our sort of situation. There's a large Middle Eastern community living outside of the Middle East who might not be able to, eat the flavors that they're used to at home. And then there's all these other people who've never got to experience Middle Eastern food before, who, they might be interested in cooking it themselves at home. So I think that was always a very big point for us. It's just we're able to show Middle Eastern food to people who haven't seen it before, or for people who are unable to eat it regularly and they might be missing foods that they grew up with. And I think that was something that Selma realized quite early on when she moved here, is that you get homesick for food, and food is one of those things that connects you to a place and a certain feeling.
That is definitely true. And if I didn't have my mum as a reference, then I mean, even having my mom as a reference, it was a struggle, because I can guarantee that no Middle Eastern parent gives you proper measurements when it comes to recipes. So it was always a struggle knowing how much of things to put and ratios and whatnot. We wanted to address this problem or this gap in the market and work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one question from Tina W is, I would like to know what's the one recipe you want to film really badly, but haven't yet for some reason. I think the one that I have in mind is basically a dish called Feteer, which you can get, all over the place in Egypt. It's basically layers of pastry which surround a filling, and it's kind of like a bread. So they sell it as a bread which has just got loads of different layers, kind of like, how puff pastry has loads of layers, but these are completely separate layers. Then there's the other version of Feteer, which is stuffed Feteer, and that's the one that I miss the most. And so it's a pie, but it's wrapped in dough, and it's so crispy. They stuff it with sausage and cheese and olives and onions and peppers. And the reason we haven't made it on the channel so far is because it's not the simplest thing to make. So you get this ball of dough and they spread it out so thin. They basically stretch it over a massive marble worktop, and it's so thin you can literally see through it. It's not like pasta where people say you should be able to read through it. No, this is literally see-through. And then what they do is they fold it over itself quite a few times. And we just don't have the space for that. But also we don't have an oven which would get it to the right exact texture. I think it's one of those things where you need a pizza steel or a pizza stone to make it at home. It's just a complex creation, but it's one of the best foods in the world. It's so crispy. It's so cheesy. It's like a pizza just wrapped in layers of crispy, flaky crust. I think that's the one that I really want to do.
Can you tell how much he loves Feteer?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there are also other versions of Feteer across the Middle East.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, there's quite a few different countries which do similar kind of things. I believe in Yemen they have one which I can't remember what it's called. It's a specific kind of bread. If you remember the name, yes, msammin. That's the one, I think. If that's the correct name, let me know in the comments. But yeah, it's got a very unique texture. There's lots of different layers. And they also do sweet ones too. So, you can get these stuffed with Nutella and banana. You can get these coated in powdered sugar and milk. And it's so good. Yeah, and clotted cream, of course. And it's just such a delicious food. I really think it's one of those things that if you get a chance to try, you really, really should. What's one dish that you want to do on the channel?
I think for me, the dish that I really, 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 really wanted to do was طعمية, the Egyptian falafel. And I got to do this one. But now I'm really excited to do halewa. It's eaten all across the Middle East and in Greece as well.
Yep,
right?
Greece and Turkey.
Greece and Turkey. And it's a bit technical. There are easy recipes where you just mix tahini with sugar, I think it was, or honey, and milk powder, and then you get halwa. But the proper halewa, they use this root. I think it's called sap. I can't remember.
There's a root, I think it's sapwort or something like that. And what it does is when it's cooked and you add the sugar syrup to it, it foams up like a marshmallow. And I believe it's related to Marsh's mallow, or the original mallow, which marshmallows used to be made from a very long time ago, which is where they get their name. But yeah, it foams up like soap does, right? And it expands like crazy.
As soon as you add the sugar syrup.
And so it's one of those things, we'll probably end up doing it. It's not difficult. It's just, it needs experimentation to get to the point where, we'd be confident making a video and showing it. There's also some things which were filmed and we haven't shown on the channel. This is something that nobody asked us, but I did wanted to point out is that we don't put out a video unless we're convinced by it. We've had quite a few things where we've tried to cook something, but we can't get it right. There's things where we're able to make the dish perfectly, for ourselves at home, but then when we come to film it, it just doesn't want to work. There's a dish called chicken pane, and we've done that a few times, and each time it just hasn't come out just right. So I've had to park the video.
We actually filmed it twice.
Yeah, we filmed that one twice.
What else? Oh, غريبة.
Yeah, غريبة.
Oh, that was a nightmare.
Yeah.
That took like 9 tries. And we still were not happy with the results. It doesn't mean that it didn't taste good. I mean, it tasted good. It's just not the one we wanted. Yeah. So, yeah, if we're not satisfied with the recipe, it's not going out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Luke Rate asks, can you talk about the process you use to take, create, and test your recipes? Also, what got you into cooking? Why do you enjoy it so much? I think the first thing we do, obviously, is just decide what it is we want to be cooking. There's thousands of dishes in the Middle East, and there's hundreds of different subcategories that you can think of. and variations within that. So the first thing is, we obviously decide what it is we're cooking. And we also think about which variation we want. Do we want to try maybe the Syrian kind, the Iraqi kind, the Palestinian kind? And we start looking for the recipes online. One of the big sources for that is YouTube. Middle Eastern cooking channels are all over YouTube. There's hundreds of them with over 1 million subscribers because cooking is such an integral part of Middle Eastern life. We start there, we start looking at the recipes, trying to see, what are the common elements between them. There's always going to be variations from each person's recipe to the next because, recipes in the Middle East can change based on what day of the week it is. So it's one of those things where you need to look at a lot of different recipes to understand what's going on. And we obviously look at articles and we look at recipes on blogs online in Arabic. Most of the recipes we do source are in Arabic though. And if it's not a Middle Eastern country that speaks Arabic, or if it's another country that we sometimes cover like Iran or Turkey, we'll look at other sources for that. So there's lots of big channels that we take a look at and there's lots of different sources we look at. And we basically just gather all this information.
We try really hard to make sure that the recipes are very authentic. For example, the Palestinian masakhan and the ma'moul, those recipes I've taken from my best friend's mother. And because I know they are as authentic as they can get. Actually, the fesenjoon was such a hard dish to make because it was so difficult to find authentic videos to watch on YouTube, and also because we do not understand Persian, so it was really difficult to get this one. I spoke to a colleague of mine after testing fesenjoon for the first time, and she actually ran me through her Iranian grandma's fesenjoon recipe. And this is how far we go when it comes to recipe and authenticity.
We tend to look for first-hand sources if possible. So, if there's friends of ours who are Libyan or Palestinian or any other nationality, we try to go to them to understand how their families cook the dishes. One of the issues you get with recipes online is that there's just so much variation, but also there's a lot of shortcuts you see in some recipes. So what we do is we try to average out all the different things. So, for example, the Iraqi dolma recipe, that one, there was so many different videos we saw. Some recipes use tamarind, some recipes use pomegranate molasses, some recipes use black limes, some use 2 of them, some use 3 of them. And what we did was we took those recipes, we wrote down the different ratios and all that kind of stuff. And then we started experimenting. If it turns out good, okay, right, what might we want to change next time? Should we add more of this spice, less of this? Because it's all about making sure you have a pleasing taste in your mouth, and obviously that the dish is authentic. If we can, we go to a restaurant to try the dish firsthand. So there's an Iraqi restaurant here in London who we went to, and we fell in love with their dolma. And that was the reason that we wanted to make Iraqi dolma on the channel in the first place. If we can't try the dish, then we try to get a first-hand account of what, people expect it to taste like. What do you expect the textures to be? If it's one of the dishes that we haven't actually tried before, like the Iranian fesenjoon, some of the recipes say, you have to cook it for at least 3 to 4 hours so that the fat can split out of it. So we follow those steps, even if we don't understand what the purpose of them is, just to make sure that, we're actually following the true identity of the dish, and we're actually going through with it, the way that it's supposed to be done. Especially when it comes to things that we don't speak the language, so especially Turkish and Iranian food, those two, we have to kind of follow the recipes blindly. But the thing we always keep in mind when we're developing these recipes is that they need to be as true to the original as possible. We don't add ingredients that, wouldn't be used in the country. We don't, do our own inventions. If, for example, a recipe calls for making a soup or a stock, I might maybe sear the meat, even if the recipes don't call for searing the meat, just because that's like a added flavor. But we don't make changes that are too radical from the original directions that we see.
I think one of the things that caused a lot of controversy was frying the vermicelli in the Libyan soup. I haven't seen any recipe that does that, but this is something that we've always done because it just prevents the extra starch from getting into the soups, and it helps keep the orzo or the vermicelli in good shape so it doesn't expand too much and soak up all the liquid. I don't think that changes its authenticity. I mean, it would improve the overall result of the dish, or at least in my opinion.
We're not trying to rewrite the way Middle Eastern food is cooked. at all. Sometimes, we might include a step that makes sense, but it doesn't change the dish. It doesn't alter the dish in any way that I see. And in reality, it just serves to make the dish just that little bit nicer. So December Clouds asks, when you go to Egypt, what's the first thing that you want to eat? I think for me, the thing I crave the most whenever I go to Egypt is seafood. Like a seafood meal in Egypt is one of those things that we have about, whenever we go to Egypt, we have it at least once. We get a collection of prawns, of calamari, of fish, of soup, of pasta dishes. And seafood in Egypt is just, it's next level. I've never had seafood as good as you can get it in Egypt. The spices, the herbs, the way that it's cooked, it's just amazing. And I can't wait to share seafood recipes with you.
I think for me it was always tamaya, which is the Egyptian falafel. But since we've done the recipe now, then it's probably going to be either gibna rumi, which is this cheese. It's a hard cheese that's quite similar to Parmesan, but not quite.
Yeah.
It's a bit strange. You have to try it to understand.
Yeah.
Or Feteer.
Yeah. So a question from Aaron WP, one of our patrons. Any thoughts on halal carts and street vendors? In America, a lot of people get their first taste of Middle Eastern food from a truck or a cart. We're really big fans of street food ourselves. I mean, we eat a lot of street food ourselves and we really, really enjoy it. And it's a big part of the culture in the UK where you get food markets that you can go to and there's loads of different offerings and things. Most people here will try their first falafel at one of these places, or maybe they go to a Lebanese restaurant or something like that. I think street food carts are a fantastic way of getting people to try new things. And I think it's very good that people support these street food carts. Most of them are mom and pop operations, people just starting something small, showing off their food. There's a few different ones that, I absolutely love myself. And I'll talk about one of them a bit later on in this video. So one of the questions that we got was, what have you found that differentiates most Middle Eastern recipes found online to the ones you share?
I would say authenticity. We try really hard to put out authentic recipes. I would also say how detailed the recipes are. I haven't come across any other YouTube channel which does detailed Middle Eastern recipes, at least not in English.
I think, that's the key thing is detail. We want people to be able to recreate the dishes as close to we make it as home. So the point is, if I need to tell you how small to cut something, I will tell you how small to cut something. If I need to tell you the temperature, I'll tell you the temperature, because in the end of the day, food is about flavor, texture, and, all the combination of all of those things. So it's important to make sure that when I give you a recipe, you need to be able to understand what it will taste like and then what to look for to make sure you get it correct. So I think that's one of the key things that separates us from everyone else. Yeah, I think also we want to make it approachable. A lot of people seem to think that complex recipes are hard to do because there's so many things involved. But when I come across a complex recipe that is well spelled out, I know that if I follow these steps, I can get a good result. And that's something we try to do as well but if I give you enough detailed steps, it should make it so that you're less intimidated and you're more willing to try it if you're intrigued by the dish. So one question by John Flea. What are the essential spices and groceries in your cooking that bring every dish one step beyond? I think rather than it being specific spices or ingredients, it's the quality of them. Spices should be fresh and they should be high quality, because you can get chili flakes, at 10 different price points and they will taste completely different. You can get ground coriander that is really old, or you can get the whole spice and grind it yourself and it smells completely different. I think the key thing with Middle Eastern food is you don't want to use obnoxious ingredients. We don't use obnoxiously expensive ingredients, but when you do try to source something, it's better that you get an ingredient that is good quality, because it does make a big difference in the end product.
Like sumet or sumac, it really makes a huge difference if you have bad quality, because you won't feel the acidity of it. You're going to need to use at least double the amount of sumac if you're using bad quality sumac.
And that's one of the ways where using a poorer quality ingredient can change a dish, because if you're making something like Palestinian musakhan, if you add twice as much sumac, it will affect the texture because the leftover sauce will end up quite dry. And sometimes, you end up having to use twice as much of a bad quality ingredient. So it costs you more than using a premium ingredient from the start. And that's something that you kind of have to think about when it comes to cooking in general, not just Middle Eastern cooking. So Faith Nelson asks, I'd like a list of spices, syrups needed to keep on hand for cooking Middle Eastern foods on the fly. So we're actually planning on doing a full episode on Middle Eastern spices, basically talking about the different spices, where you'd encounter them, how you'd store them, how you'd use them, different spice blends that you can create. But that will be coming in the near future. I'd say the spices you kind of want to keep on hand for Middle Eastern cooking are cumin, sumac, coriander, and then boharat or seven spice. Yep, definitely cardamom. Nutmeg. Sometimes it's used in some of the dishes, not all of the dishes. You can definitely do without it. Black pepper, of course. High quality black pepper. I think there's a big difference between the stuff that you get pre-ground, and just like your regular supermarket black pepper, and real strong black pepper. And you can buy it. I tend to find that if you buy spices online from eBay or from Amazon or whatever, you can find lots of different brands that are really good quality, way better than the McCormick or, name brand supermarkets black pepper. And it makes a big difference.
For syrups, maybe pomegranate molasses?
Pomegranate molasses is definitely a really good one to have on hand. You can add it to a lot of different foods. I wouldn't say add it to every dish and it makes it Middle Eastern, but you can get a Levantine flair by using it. And we've actually got a video where you can make your own pomegranate molasses at home. Tahini is one of those as well. Yep. We've got another video on that as well, teaching you how you can make it and how you can use it a few different ways. In terms of things like grains and pulses, there's lentils, there's bulgur, there's chickpeas, there's fava beans. There's quite a lot of different things, and frika, of course. So there's quite a few different things that you could obviously use. It just all depends on, what it is that you want to be cooking. I'd say the spices are the things that will work the most, because if you can't, if you don't have frika or bulgur on hand, you could probably use rice as a substitute in a pinch. It's the spices that I think are the key thing that you have on hand for Middle Eastern cooking. One question from this person, I'm sorry I don't know how to pronounce the name. How are Middle Eastern feasts composed, say if you have guests over? Do you have such a thing as starters, mains, desserts like we do in the UK? Are there components that are generally a must, like a side salad, rice, or flatbreads? Selma's mum is one of the people who loves to cook feasts a lot, and my grandma was as well. She absolutely loved to make these massive feasts for people. And I'd say the thing that I find interesting is that in the Middle East, when you have a feast, you generally have to have a large source of protein. So this is either going to be like a lamb leg, beef roast, or...
And there has to be 2 different kinds of protein. Yeah. So there has to be a red meat and chicken.
So you have to have a white meat and a dark meat and
at least 2 different kinds of protein.
Yeah, and so that usually forms the main thing on the table. And then there's usually loads of different sides. Sometimes you end up with 3-4 different meat dishes, but then there's all these different sides as well. And, salads and sauces and soups. Soups are a very big thing in the Middle East. Those are generally always eaten at feasts and things like that. I think it might be an interesting idea for a future video to plan out a Middle Eastern feast, think of the different components that we'd like to include. It obviously depends on how many guests you have coming to the dinner. How many dishes you'd make and things like that. But yeah, I think it would be a cool video to show you guys, how would we plan for a dinner. One of the things about Middle Eastern culture is that you're supposed to treat your guests better than yourself. This is kind of ingrained in Middle Eastern culture. So your guests are the most important people in your house. And so there's this whole thing of making a massive dinner. Even if there's only 2-3 people coming over, you make a really big dinner, just like there's lots for them to choose from and they can eat everything they want. And it does play into Middle Eastern feasts a lot, and then we usually end up having to eat leftovers for 3-4 days afterwards. But yeah, it's all part of the experience, really. So Romina Pecora asks, what's your favourite Middle Eastern cuisine to cook and why? I think my favourite one is Egyptian, just because it's what I'm most familiar with. It's, what I know the most, and it's what I crave the most, just because that's what I grew up eating. But then obviously there's loads of different dishes that just, bring me joy. I especially love grilled foods, and I find that, grilled meats, are absolutely fantastic, especially grilled chicken, which is completely boneless. I absolutely love that. What about you?
For me, I would say maybe Syrian recipes. I love the aubergine fatta hummus, which was our last video. However, I'm a lot more comfortable with Egyptian recipes just because we cook those quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question from Romina, and they ask, what's the best street food you've had? What was it, and do you plan on making it on the channel? I think one of my favourite street foods is Turkish gözleme. They're basically flatbreads that are cooked maybe sometimes with cheese inside them, and they're folded. There's a place here in London that does gözleme wraps. So they take a Turkish gözleme and then they stuff it with Turkish sausage and halloumi cheese and then loads of salad and sauces. And it is one of my favourite foods, and it's so cheap as well. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I want to do it on the channel someday. But it's one of those things that you need a good surface to cook the bread on. And we currently don't have a good stove that will work well for bread. So another question from one of our patrons, Asti Lala, asks, what's some commonly overlooked aspects of Middle Eastern food in your experience? I think a lot of people, when they think of Middle Eastern food, they think of meat a lot of the time. And that's probably because when we have guests in the Middle East, you know, you want to be gracious and serve your guests the best thing you can. And the best thing in the Middle East is meat, because meat is one of those things that's rare, it's expensive. Back in the olden days, not everyone could afford to have fresh meat. So culturally, serving meat is a big thing to your guests. But it's not the biggest part of Middle Eastern cuisine. I'd say the vast majority of our cuisine is food that is made with seasonally available ingredients. You know, we stuff basically any vegetable that comes into season and we cook it, and that's one of the big parts of Middle Eastern food. There's a lot of vegan food as well. A lot of people don't realize that a large percentage of the Middle East population are Christian and they observe Lent, which means that for a large portion of the year they're fasting, especially in Egypt where we've got 10% of a Coptic Christian population. And so a lot of food has to be vegan for their Lent fasts. We've got loads of vegan dishes, and in fact, our most popular breakfast dishes are all vegan. We've got falafel that is vegan, we've got fool, we've got hummus, we've got loads of smaller preparations of vegetable dishes.
People generally think that Middle Eastern cuisine equals lots of spices. Not all Middle Eastern dishes require a lot of spices. They may be spices other cultures are not familiar with. Okay, let's take, for example, the potato casserole. It only requires 3 spices, including salt and pepper. So it's just salt, pepper, and ground cardamom.
With most Middle Eastern dishes, there's a way you can make the dishes where it gets the correct character. And then there's ways you can make the dishes that is 100% all out. And with our recipes, we always do the all-out version. But if you're missing a spice which isn't an essential flavor of the dish, and I usually mention when something is an essential flavor of the dish, then it's usually fine to leave it out. I mean, if you, for example, have an allergy to something, or if you're one of those people who think coriander tastes like soap, leave it out. You're leaving it out because you can't use it, but it still has the same essence in the end of the day. And spices are one of those things that they differ from household to household. So one of the questions we got is, what parts of the videos do you specifically work on? I'd say everything that happens before shooting is pretty much Salma's responsibility. So Salma's the genius amongst us who's able to try a recipe and tell immediately what's missing from it. She's got the magical palette, and that means, when we come to recipe testing and recipe developing, she's able to spot the differences and perfect the recipe in a way that, I might not be able to. On my side, I do the filming and then all the stuff on camera that you guys see, and then I do the editing and the voiceover. Salma would be in the videos more, but because of her PhD, she's, a bit too busy to be in the regular weekly schedule. But we're hoping that we can incorporate her more in videos in the future. In terms of the social media stuff, Salma does quite a bit of that as well. She manages the Instagram. She was doing reels and stuff on there as well. And then apart from that, Salma does the food styling. I could not make a dish look good if I wanted to. If you took my family hostage, I couldn't make certain dishes look good. So Salma's the one who does all the styling. She buys all the props as well because she just has such good taste. And as you can tell by the photos and our house around us, she's the one who's designed all of this and put this all together. And also the photography. That's the other bit that she's really working on.
It's a joint team effort.
Yeah.
And I think we make a very good team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. And I think all of the viewers will agree as well. So one question from Zephyr is it possible to make baklava, kunefa, basbousa low carb? I'd love to eat them without worrying whether my blood sugar level is going to kill me. I'll let Salma take this one because Salma's got personal experience with this.
So I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I've just come to realize that I don't have to worry too much about my carbs. All I can do is adjust my insulin levels to make up for the amount of carbs that I'm having. Maybe try artificial sweeteners to make the syrup instead of normal sugar. I don't know how you can reduce the carbs in phyllo pastry.
So what I will say is this is definitely not medical advice. We're just saying that, you know, if you want to eat these foods, the best solution is probably to go for the original thing, but just have a smaller portion. That way, you know, it's not too much carbs in your system at one time. And then if you want to do like a low carb syrup instead of the regular syrup, maybe you can look into other syrups that you can make, maybe something with a sugar alcohol or stevia or something like that. We don't have experience doing that, but I think it would be some sort of combination of water and cornstarch maybe to thicken it, and then the sweetener that you'd be using. So Santiago Colina asks, what would you say is the best vegan recipe widely available in the Middle East? It's a very hard question because on my part, it's a hard question because there's tons of different dishes. One of the things I absolutely love is kisir, which is a Turkish bulgur salad with pomegranate molasses and red pepper paste. We covered this on the channel, and it's just such a refreshing thing to eat. I mean, you get such a wide range of flavors from it. And then there's all these herbs and, you know, spring onions in it. It's such a delicious food, particularly within Lebanese mezza as well. So there's lots of mezza dishes that are vegan. You know, you've got fattoush, tabbouleh, hummus, baba ghanoush.
I mean, you've got koshari, which is Egyptian. Yeah. Falafel in all its forms is absolutely vegan.
And I think it's quite easy to adapt a lot of recipes to be vegan. For example, you know, we've got one of our favorite dishes that we've done on the channel is the aubergine fatta or fattat makdous. And it's basically cooked aubergines served with flatbread. And then there's a tangy tomato tamarind sauce. And then there's a yogurt tahini sauce. If you can get a vegan yogurt replacement, such as, you know, the Oatly ones or the coconut ones or something like that, you can easily veganize the dish. And so what I've done is there's a playlist for vegan and vegetarian dishes, but there's also a playlist for easily adaptable recipes where you could replace one or two components with, you know, a vegan alternative, and it works quite well. So I think it all comes down to your preference on what kind of dishes you like, you know, whether you like vegetable heavy dishes, whether you like dishes with a meat replacement, whether you like things with beans. There's so many different things out there. And I'd suggest going through the playlist and just looking at some of them and trying them out, and just to find what you like the most. So a question from Boris J. Given the easy access, how come seafood doesn't seem as prominent in Middle Eastern food? I think this is probably partly mine and Salma's fault. So there are tons of seafood recipes in the Middle East. I think every single Middle Eastern country has access to the sea, or multiple seas even. Seafood does definitely feature very heavily in Middle Eastern cuisine, but we haven't really got around to making some of the seafood dishes. One of the reasons we haven't really covered any of these dishes is because the place we usually get fish from is a fish market here in London called Billingsgate. And during COVID, that's been closed to the public for most of the time. So it's been really hard to actually get the fresh seafood that we want. When it comes to cooking Middle Eastern seafood, we want that authentic, you know, fresh out of the net catch experience. And that's something that we're hoping to cover in the next few months. You know, we'll make some of our favorite dishes. I mean, we've got butterflied prawns that we make in Egypt that are absolutely amazing. Calamari tagines, which are amazing. Seafood soup, mussels. I mean, in Turkey, they make a dolma with seafood where they basically stuff clams with rice. And I think that is just one of the greatest things ever. So we can't wait to cover some of these dishes for you. And we'll definitely make a playlist for it when we do. So one question from Gareth D'Souza. Any chance of Imam Biyaldi? Also, any more vegetarian, vegan recipes? Definitely. We'll definitely cover Imam Biyaldi at some point. If you don't know, this is a Turkish dish. I think the name translates to something like the Imam has gone crazy, which is a very strange name. We'll definitely cover it at some point, and we hope to do it in the near future. In terms of vegan and vegetarian recipes, there's tons of them, and we'll carry on doing them. And when we do them, we'll add them to the playlist that we already have on the channel. So if you're looking for more vegan, vegetarian recipes, make sure to check those playlists out. So the final question we've got today is, also, I can't pronounce this name, but it says, coming from someone who unfortunately has to watch the calories due to health issues, Do you have any light Middle Eastern dishes you could recommend or ways to make them lighter? The best thing that I would say for Middle Eastern dishes in terms of lightness is probably grilled dishes. If you want to make something like, one of the rice dishes that we have, maybe you could leave out some of the oil. You can cut down the proportion of rice, or you can cut down the proportion of the meat in there. Sometimes the other ingredients as well are quite high in calories. You can maybe reduce the percentage of them. I wouldn't change the spices too much unless you're removing a lot of the meal.
For example, like the aubergine feta. The aubergines and the bread are fried in the video. However, when we make this at home, we generally toast the bread in the oven with just a tablespoon of olive oil, and I do the same with the aubergines. I just stick them in the oven. I know they don't taste as good as the fried ones, but just to watch our calories as well, we tend to go to healthier versions of the dish. So feel free to make healthier versions, like, as Obi said, lower the amounts of fat in recipes.
We've had people say that they've made the kubeba or the sambusak in their air fryer and it turned out well. So if that's something you have access to, you could experiment with cooking some of this stuff in air fryers or even pressure cookers, or using just generally healthier cuts of meat. It's one of the things where the same principles that apply to general recipes, so you want to make that healthier, you can do the same substitutions in Middle Eastern food as well. So I think that's it for all the questions. If there were multiples of questions, I'll probably put them up on screen. Maybe I didn't figure out how to do that, but I tried to get to all of them. If I've forgotten any questions, let me know and I'll try and answer them on the comments down below. So we just wanted to say thank you to all of you for watching. Thank you to our 50,000 subscribers. Thank you to everybody who's been watching our videos, making the food, sharing their photos with us, trying things, recommending us to their friends. Thank you to all our patrons for their support. It's been wonderful having you guys along with us, and we want to grow the channel quite big. So thank you for being with us on this journey to 100k and beyond. And from Maple and all of us here at Middle East, thank you very much. And I think she's about ready to go. Bye-bye.
Oh, bye.
Bye.